I was talking to one of my best trader friends on a Spaces yesterday, and he said within the next 3 months, Bitcoin has a genuine chance of hitting 50K. And at first, I was taken aback. But given his track record, I dug deeper into the data, and apparently there is a timeline here out in front of us that could potentially lead to a 50K Bitcoin this year. I'm going to give you the scenario for that occurring, what could happen to altcoins if that does occur, what altcoins I'm looking at if there is a Bitcoin rally. And of course, we're also going to look at the bear case and discuss the potential scenario that could result in Bitcoin not making that move, and what potentially to expect from Q3. But one thing is clear, there is now less than 240 days until the BlackRock ETF approval, if it is given the green light by the SEC. And that does line up simultaneously with the Bitcoin halving, which is in 308 days. So coincidence? Well, maybe not, and maybe this will lead to bigger price action over the next 240 days, but we're going to get into that in this show as well. If you're excited, smash the like button. Lots to talk about. Actually, a lot of news actually broke overnight. I know that Rand hasn't been streaming consistently, so I've got a lot to catch you up on. So if you're watching this show, there is definitely a lot to discuss. We saw news come out of China. We have more institutions lining up for Bitcoin ETFs, and I even have a couple trades open at the moment, and I want to run you through my logic there, as well as my plan for the next couple months. So lots and lots to talk about. Without further ado, let's get into the Bitcoin chart. So looking at Bitcoin here, we did break on the 1 hourly out of this wedge. You can see it was actually a pretty clean wedge. You had 3 touches on the bottom line here. You also had a few touches on the top. Over here, you had a couple lower highs, and then you also had this horizontal resistance level, which Bitcoin actually broke out of. Now, this was a breakout that I did trade overnight. If we go into my Gains Network account, you can see I opened a long at 30,430, which I'm currently up $102 on. So this long actually was up, I think, over $1,000 overnight, but I went to bed, left my position open, because my stop loss is under 29,000. So I felt usually I won't do that, but I felt comfortable leaving it overnight. And then I woke up to it only being $100 in the green. So look, disappointing, because I thought maybe I'd be in the money if Bitcoin continued to the upside. But we did have a slight reversal. Some FUD about TUSD, which we'll talk about at the end of the show, started to spread, basically about how this move was manipulated. I think that did spook some people. And we did see Bitcoin roll over, but technically we have been printing higher lows. So in terms of just structurally here, looking from a pure TA perspective, I do think Bitcoin looks quite good, and it's been reason enough for me to keep my position open. Given the fact we did have a breakout, of course, on the daily, we've started to see this candle reverse, but we're still above that key level at 30,400. If we start to break below 30, I'll look at closing off my position and maybe laddering it a bit lower at around 29K. So I'm actively managing it. But Bitcoin to me actually looks quite good, but I do think it does need to have that next push to the upside over the next few days if it is going to have a big move. If we keep kind of stalling longer and longer and longer, I think the higher the chance that we actually roll over back down to the downside, of which you've got price targets of 29, and then price targets of 26.5 if things get real ugly. But structurally, I do think Bitcoin needs to hold this 29K level, at least in the short term, to make that move. If it does drop below and heads towards that 27K level, then that is going to take a lot longer, and I think you can invalidate the current run. That's basically how I'm seeing things at the moment. But if we hold above 29, then the current run is still on the cards for a push higher to the upside. I just feel like the market could have a bit more juice here. Like, usually I'm very skeptical heading into resistance, and we are heading into resistance, but just based on the way Bitcoin's been behaving over the past few weeks, just based on some of the news we're getting, which we're going to get into in a few minutes, I feel like there is a bit of momentum here, and I'd never really want to counter trade momentum. So I'm not one to pick tops and try and time them to the exact day. I'm more one to go with the exact trend, and we're seeing the trend here is bullish. So any pullbacks, until proven wrong, will be buys for me personally, will be longs for me personally. So that's kind of why I'm in a long right now. If you don't want to trade on Gains, by the way, there is a link in the description. It's a pretty nice place to trade. You can see the interface here. My long's actually a bit slightly up now since I started the show, 125 up. The other long I actually took yesterday was on PEPE. So similar premise here. You have the 1 hourly chart in confluence with the Bitcoin chart. You have a break out of the diagonal, and we had a pump to the upside on this key horizontal. If you guys watch the show, you would know that key horizontal, because I said, look, if we do come back down and retest, I'll be longing there. So I did say that on the show. We did get our successful retest, and my trade is now 21% up. Once again, it was, I think, 50% up before I went to bed, but the market did slightly retrace a little bit. So for everyone that got into that trade, well done. We are in the money in terms of the people that are still in a PEPE long right now. Look, we have broken above. We've started to stall, but we did clear these highs here on the 1 hourly. So nothing to panic about just yet. In fact, if you're like trading on super small time frames, you could argue we're forming another flag. For that reason, I won't close quite yet, but I will move my stop up to about entry now just to protect myself. Because once you're in the green with the position, there's no need to really risk it here. Unless, you know, you're super degen and you're trading on the higher time frames, then of course you have this level probably just below the horizontal support on the daily that you could look to place your stop loss at roughly the 0.14 region. So that is over an apex because Gains doesn't have the PEPE pair. And yeah, we'll keep riding this. It's an $8,000 position. We'll see how it goes. I think my Bitcoin position is 5K plus 7, so 30K. So 30K, 8K. You know, all right size if we get a pump. But yeah, let's see what happens. I'm certainly not. I will be pretty quick to cut if things start to reverse here. I'm just leaving them open because we have had a slight sell-off this morning, starting to see signs of a reversal. So I'm waiting on that next hourly candle on Bitcoin and PEPE to monitor how things are going over there. So that is my trade update. If you wanted to stay up to date with those trades, we actually did discuss them on the spaces. The logic I present in today's video was all discussed on the space. So if you guys are following me on Twitter, I recommend going and checking out that space in your spare time. We had Gareth Soloway during the first 20 minutes giving a market update for us. Then we have Smiley Capital outlining his thesis of why Bitcoin could go to 50K within the next 3 months, which sounds freaking crazy. And I did really challenge him on that to get his full thoughts. And look, he made a pretty compelling argument, but, you know, obviously a subjective argument. Jason also came in. His thesis was essentially that, you know, we are in a structural uptrend. We are in a structural bull market. He doesn't see us going much lower then I think he said 22K again, but if Bitcoin clears 31, then his next base for the bull run is 25K. So if we do break this next level to the upside, he was basically saying that he doesn't see us hitting 25K again, which I found very interesting. And Patrick and Drake are more, you know, your DeFi traders. But all three guys, you know, Gareth's more bearish heading into Q3. You know, Gareth, the typical bears, short Bitcoin right now. Smiley's heavily long. He almost made me want to FOMO when I listened to the space yesterday, and Jason as well, quite bullish as well. You know, kind of affirming that we are in a structural uptrend. This is the beginning of a bull market, and therefore pullbacks are for buying. I think out of all of them, I probably lean towards Jason's thesis the most. I think Smiley's would be great if it happened, and we'll get into it today, but it is very optimistic, and it does rely on a few things, in my opinion. And Gareth, a little bit more bearish, a little bit more cautious. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Let's just see how that one plays out. But it really depends on some of the whether we do get a Fed pivot or whether the macro starts to deteriorate. So if liquidity conditions deteriorate, I can definitely see an equities pullback affecting Bitcoin. But the thing is, right now, Bitcoin's being driven by this super strong institutional narrative. And this is the first thing I want to talk about. So we just saw overnight Fidelity announce that they are planning to submit a spot Bitcoin ETF filing. And it's been very interesting to see the lay of the land post BlackRock. Like BlackRock filing for a spot Bitcoin ETF, obviously hugely bullish news for the crypto market with their approval rate of, I think, 576 out of 577 ETFs actually getting approved. They are coming up against a formidable opponent in the SEC who has never approved a Bitcoin spot ETF. We've actually seen I think 30 spot ETF rejections and 70 general Bitcoin ETF rejections. So if they were coming up against any opponent that could defeat them in this quest to get a Bitcoin NFT, it's the SEC. What gives me confidence, though, is the fact it's BlackRock. They're not stupid. They don't want to risk their reputation just for the sake of getting a Bitcoin ETF. If I said NFT, I meant ETF. So yeah, I don't think they would risk their reputation there. And I also think in, you know, Fidelity, WisdomTree, Valkyrie, these big multi-billion or multi-trillion-dollar players also wouldn't attempt to file if they weren't confident as well. And I think BlackRock, if they get approved, obviously the SEC is going to have to adhere to a general structure, a general roadmap for what it takes to get a Bitcoin spot ETF. And that could just open up the floodgates to many, many more. And I think that's why we're seeing lots of filings. So Fidelity filing was huge because they're another really big asset manager We actually see Ryan is on Spaces right now. Actually, they're talking about TUSD, which we're going to talk about at the end, as well as the Celsius sell-off. I think the Celsius sell-off is a bit of a nothing burger. In fact, so if you guys don't know what that is, they basically, they own a lot of Sol, a lot of Matic. They've been kind of selling. They're being forced to liquidate a lot of their altcoins to repay creditors. I actually think for something like an ADA or a Matic, these kind of sell events can mark local bottoms. And that's actually kind of what happened. You had your bottom during the Robinhood FUD that happened a few days ago. You had your pump. You've had your sell-off again, probably as people were forced to liquidate yesterday. And then you've had a swing off the lows. Let's also see what's happened with Solana. I wouldn't be shorting, in case like you see that headline and get panicky, I wouldn't be shorting into a forced sale. That's kind of like I think a dumb strategy. Solana as well, you've had the bounce. You're swinging to make your lows at 1590 here. I actually did buy some at 1450 actually. And I did tweet about that. So we are up on that position. And then Matic as well, you're seeing a similar pattern. So doesn't really look like a short to me, just given the fact that you are starting to form on at least the hourly, your higher low. But let's see how this daily candle closes. You would obviously need to close above the previous daily candle to confirm an uptrend there, or else it could come back down. So just keep an eye on that. But yeah, I don't think that's a high risk reward short, but there is a fair bit of FUD there. But yeah, going back to the ETF point, look, Fidelity's coming in. We also had the EDX Markets officially be announced, which is a crypto exchange backed by Citadel, Schwab, Fidelity as well. So these big players are now starting to finally enter crypto. And Cameron 𝗏𝗏𝗏, the founder of Gemini, said the great accumulation has begun. Anyone watching the flurry of ETF filings understands the window to purchase pre-IPO Bitcoin before ETFs go live and open the floodgates is closing fast. If Bitcoin was the most obvious and best investment of the previous decade, this will likely be the most obvious and best trade of this decade. Look, obviously quite bullish, and I understand Cameron's bullish. He's a massive Bitcoin bull. I actually read his book. It was one of the first introductions to Bitcoin I had, and I found it very interesting, kind of outlining the thesis there about he's basically, after they got kicked out of Facebook, they went all in on Bitcoin, and what a crazy redemption arc that is. So clearly he's very bullish on Bitcoin, but I do think some of the logic being underpinned via this tweet is correct. The sense that you have these big players all wanting to get into the market. You have an asset which is fairly scarce and also becoming scarcer in terms of the holdings on exchanges versus illiquid holdings, so people that are actually just now full-time bag holders. Obviously, you can still experience sell events. There's still enough coins to experience downside on Bitcoin, of course, and that's why you get major pullbacks, especially with the derivatives market opening up. But in general, the theory is Bitcoin will become more scarce over time, and giving institutions and retail access to purchase Bitcoin via an ETF only adds to the demand side pressure for Bitcoin as a token. And I think that's been the premise of Bitcoin since the very beginning. It's just not until 2023 we've actually started to see mass accumulation in terms of institutional interest. And I'm saying mass accumulation in a forward-looking sense because the accumulation hasn't happened yet. But if you look at what happened to, if I can get the chart up now, if you look at what actually happened to gold after its ETF launched, you can see here when gold was $400 in the 5 years post, am I saying NFT? I meant to say ETF. I keep getting confused. ETF. After the gold ETF launched, it was at 400 and then actually rallied to 1957. So that's, a 5x in gold in 5 years. So the bullish premise here that the Bitcoin bulls are kind of perpetuating is, look, the gold ETF exemplifies just what institutional demand can do for an asset, especially a limited and scarce asset that doesn't have a great amount of supply on the market. The interesting thing is gold actually has a 2% inflation rate. I think 1% adjusted because 1% of the total gold supply is used for, manufacturing. It's actually being burnt or used in jewelry, that kind of stuff. But gold actually has an adjusted inflation rate of, 1 to 1.5% a year, depending on the given year, which means there's actually more gold obviously being mined because it's a scarce asset, but there is production of gold. And although the production dwindles every single year, the production does start, to diminish over time, but it's still coming into the market. Bitcoin's similar. The production diminishes over time, but the inflation rate is significantly lower because every 4 years it halves, right? So, we went from a 10% inflation rate to a 5%, and I think now we're sitting sub 1%. I think after this halving, it'll be correct me if I'm wrong, around 0.25% Bitcoin annual inflation rate. Let me actually get that stat up. Bitcoin annual inflation supply percentage. What percentage is it? 21 million units. Current inflation rate's 1.8%. So it goes sub 1%. It goes to 0.9%, which will actually make it less inflationary than gold. And then in 4 years, it'll go to 0.45%, which makes it, half or a quarter as inflationary. So this is your bullish hopium case for the Bitcoin halving. I don't necessarily think that, just because gold did a 5x after its ETF means that Bitcoin necessarily will, but it's just an interesting data set to look at and kind of compare what institutional demand can do for a relatively scarce asset. But I'm going to get into the timeline here in just a second. Before that, we can also see that 21Shares filed their spot Bitcoin ETF application back in April with 𝗵𝗵𝗏 and ARK. So we actually had players starting to position themselves pre-BlackRock. And 𝗵𝗏𝗏 said the files this past week make me even more bullish. We're committed to offering US investors a safe, regulated way to access this exciting asset class. Interestingly, the grayscale Bitcoin GBTC premium has diminished from 46%. So it was actually a 46% discount to NAV. I think at one point during FTX, it was a 50%, and there's a lot of grayscale FUD going around, to 30% today. So basically what the market is telling you here is that the likelihood of Grayscale now getting approval for a spot Bitcoin ETF, which will allow redemptions of Bitcoin, because right now they're operating a futures ETF, is much higher. So that is what the market's telling you, that they are believing the probability is that BlackRock will get approved here. Obviously, if they don't get approved, that is now your bearish catalyst for a complete narrative flip. And that might also be your bearish catalyst that lines up with the stock market correction if someone like 𝗵𝗏𝗏 is right in their prediction. However, I think the probability strongly errs on the side of BlackRock getting approved. And that's why I wouldn't bake a disapproval too heavily into my financial planning, because I just have to operate on the assumption that probability-wise, it will get approved. Otherwise, I'll drive myself mad and potentially miss out on a run in the meantime, because there is a timeline here that is a lot longer than some people think. We're about to get into that in a couple minutes. Before we get into that and some of the big news out of China, remember, if you do want to sign up for a new OKX account, you have a massive $30,000 reward. So $10,000 just for registering, another $10,000 just for depositing $50 or more, and then another $10,000 just for trading, depending on how much trading volume you trade. So $30,000 up for grabs, but obviously these are mystery boxes, right? So you may not win anything at all. In fact, probability is you don't win anything at all, but there is a slight chance you can win up to $10,000. So look, for the gamblers that want a bit of fun, opening a mystery box, it is free, of course, to register for an account, and then you can also do the other steps to unlock 2 more bonuses. So this is only eligible for another 3 days. So if you don't have an OKX account and you want to trade on it, link in the description to OKX. For another 3 days, you can get the $30,000 reward bonus. Okay, let's now get into China and Hong Kong. A lot of stuff happened on that front. Just looking at the comments now. Someone said, Miles, I have to go to work. I wasn't too late today. I was only 5 minutes late. But yeah, I was just going through I was actually going through the prime the USD news. So the TUSD stablecoin FUD. That's something we're going to talk about at the end as well. So I was doing some research on that before I went live. Someone said 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏's bouncing. Been interesting to see the strength of certain NFT projects. You have, your Bathing Apes, your CryptoPunks actually down 30-40% on their floors. However, you're seeing some select NFTs bounce pretty strongly. I think in a rally, those actually perform well, but only the ones showing relative strength now. So if you are an NFT trader, what you want to do is, instead of scooping floors on projects that are just dead and have performed terribly versus the market, you want to scoop projects on NFTs that have shown relative strength during this dip. As I check my Bitcoin position just quickly. Okay, it's looking okay. It's looking okay, back to 121, PEPE 380. What are the odds that this reverses after the show? I will have to adjust my stop though there to about entry. So someone said crazy pumps coming. Well, the thesis we're about to go through may lead to that. And there is a reason why I've said the 240-day. So I think my internet just went weird for a second. There's a reason why I said the 240-day timeline in the title and at the start of this video, because I believe that lines up with a pretty significant date here. Just making sure my internet's all good. It says connection unstable, but that tends to happen. I think we're all good. All right, so let's go through the Chinese news. We had some pretty big news overnight from HSBC. Actually, happened early yesterday, depending on what country you're in. They're basically the largest bank in Hong Kong. And today they announced that they're going to allow its customers to buy and sell Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs listed on the Hong Kong exchange. So this is just one more step of China. And I know it's not China directly because Hong Kong is technically a special administrative region of China, but it's just one more piece of evidence that the Chinese government or the Hong Kong government specifically is getting more bullish on crypto and starting to genuinely firm and want to become a digital asset / crypto hub. And I think this pivot has been one of the most bullish pivots of the last year in the face of a lot of regulatory uncertainty from the US, because now we have like one of the biggest nations in the world starting to get a lot more interested in this sector, and the kind of knockdown effects you're going to see from a nation like Hong Kong setting the precedent here, I think will filter down into other into many other nations that can kind of follow a similar approach. Now, if we take that logic and look at what they've done today or yesterday, we can see here that Ethereum ETFs will actually be approved. So the largest bank will allow customers to buy and sell Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs, which is very interesting that they're kind of approving ETH as well. They're the first bank in Hong Kong to allow it. There's been a lot of speculation in the US whether a Bitcoin spot ETF approval could lead to an Ethereum approval. Interesting here that Hong Kong is kind of front running this narrative here by allowing Ethereum ETFs. So I'm not sure if that is actually spot ETFs. I think it's futures only. Yeah, it's only futures, but I think this is, your first positive step to lead the way for a spot ETF, which we don't have yet in the US, but I think you need Bitcoin first to start to get ETFs for other coins. And once you have Bitcoin with an ETF, I think the chances of Ethereum getting one are a lot higher. And that's part of my bullish thesis for ETH, that eventually you are going to see institutional inflows into ETH in the form of an ETF. And not only that, but due to the ESG component of Ethereum, for some investors, it actually becomes a more palatable investment than Bitcoin. What do I mean by that? Well, Ethereum is ESG compliant in the sense that it's proof of stake. It doesn't take up so much energy to produce it. It uses 99% less energy. And there are some players in some industries which are kind of averse to Bitcoin, or at least feel a little awkward about holding Bitcoin on their balance sheets because they don't view it as very environmentally friendly. And I think that's an argument a lot of people kind of sleep over in the whole Bitcoin versus ETH thing. Now, I believe both are very different and I have different theses for both. But if you are looking at both from an investment perspective, that's a big component of why proof of stake could be better. Now, there are arguments against proof of stake, of course, decentralization. Bitcoin's more decentralized, immutability, etc. And also, having that incentive to keep the network running. Obviously, ETH is yield bearing, but it's also fluctuates based on price. Whereas Bitcoin, obviously miners make less, but that should balance out by difficulty adjustment with less miners mining. So there's kind of like multiple arguments back and forth, but the ESG component for me is actually an interesting argument I don't hear many people talking about. When it comes to an Ethereum ETF, I think that could be a kind of big factor here people are sleeping on. So 𝗙𝗵𝗃𝗃 said, Cameron's brother, that the East/West crypto flippening is accelerating. Hong Kong has just beat the USA to the punch on a Bitcoin ETF and Ether ETF. So technically it is futures, but Hong Kong launching that to clients. So that was pretty big news. Now, we also got other big news that, how the Hong Kong exchange kind of launched with minimal tokens? Well, they actually announced that they will additionally be adding to its virtual asset index BTC and ETH, but also some other coins like BNB, Matic, ADA, Filecoin, NEAR, Algo, XRP, Doge, 𝗏, TRX, XMR, XLM, and more, some being described as securities by the SEC. So it looks like their determination for what and what isn't a security is very different from the US, having the rating agency kind of declare these as virtual assets. I'm a big believer that regulation needs to have virtual assets in a separate category from commodities and securities. That's something Australia is doing through token mapping. I think something the UK is doing as well, something Hong Kong is clearly doing. And if I was the SEC, that's what I'd be doing in the US as well. Coming up with a totally different framework that doesn't rely on the 𝗬𝗍𝗄 test from World War II for how we actually determine crypto assets in the market, because I kind of think it's ridiculous that we put crypto under the purview of old legislation. It doesn't make that much sense. Whereas I would much prefer to have a new categorization which maybe includes elements of both, or has exact frameworks on if something has the expectation to receive profit through staking, then this is how we treat it. Or the staking product has to be regulated, but if it has X amount of nodes, then that is considered decentralized enough to be traded on X exchange. Like, we need those kind of specifics. I think they're going to come. this year. But unfortunately, it seems like due to the SEC's abrasiveness and brazen approach against crypto, we're going to need to see a lot of this precedent being actually set in the courts and not by government legislation itself. But the much easier path here would just be legislation. But Hong Kong seems to be leading on that front. We're also seeing positive developments from many other countries. We know about this. Dubai, England, as I said, Australia doing some stuff, also some bad stuff, kind of a little bit mixed over here. And yeah, different countries taking different approaches. I actually like what Europe did. I didn't like some of the sanctions on deposit limits, but I kind of understand why they're doing it, like anti-money laundering, etc. But the UK is promising because the Prime Minister is also very pro-crypto as well. Justin Sun said, I'm glad to hear that Hong Kong is embracing crypto by establishing rating rules. By implementing rules, Hong Kong's demonstrating its commitment to providing a secure and transparent environment for cryptocurrency businesses. So obviously that was positive news. It's kind of interesting. Does this pave the way for another China narrative? Well, China Premier Li, I don't know how to pronounce Chinese names. I'm not even going to bother saying it. Says economy is set to grow faster in the second quarter. China will take steps to boost demand. So I guess one of the reasons why crypto's run this year, it's not just off the back of institutional demand or the American macro, although stocks have rallied. It's also the fact that China has introduced liquidity provisions, and because of their weakening economy, they have taken steps to boost the economy via injecting liquidity, and Bitcoin as an asset's very sensitive to liquidity. And I think that's probably your main reason why Bitcoin actually ran so heavily from December to March, April. Not only the fact we were oversold during the forced selling event of FTX and its subsequent kind of the subsequent sales here that happened from Voyager, BlockFi, Celsius, etc. But also the fact that we were getting a shifting liquidity environment. And that's actually 𝗪𝗏's argument for why Q3 could be bearish. The argument is liquidity will start to dry up a little bit, and that is going to result in a Bitcoin pullback, which will basically follow or mirror a stocks pullback. And if I had to put my money on it, I would probably agree with that. The only thing I don't know is whether that's Q3 or Q4 or Q1. Because the thing is, the market is sensitive to liquidity, yes, but the reaction that the market takes, especially post-Fed pivots, can be very delayed. So I don't know if it's Q3 or Q4, but I think at some point we get a stock market pullback and a crypto pullback as well. The question is, in the meantime, like, how high do we go? If we do affirm here we're in a structural bull market, then every big pullback is going to be for buying. So we could rally to 34 now, pull back to 30. That's a buying opportunity. Then rally to 37, and then we could have a huge pullback back down to 32. That's your stock market sell-off. That's your huge Bitcoin sell-off and accumulation opportunity. I think just the premise of accumulating on major dips here, hasn't really changed. I think if you're holding out for 15, 12K like people were during the midst of the bear market, I think market dynamics are very different now, especially with this institutional demand for Bitcoin. You may just have to settle buying on huge pullbacks, and that's totally okay as well. That's always been the strategy, right? To buy huge periods of fear, at least on Bitcoin and ETH, and look to stack alts when ETH BTC looks good. Right now, this is Bitcoin's time to shine. You've got dominance rising, ETH BTC still getting rejected. When we start to see a reversal there, and I'll show how it looks on my charts, then I will stack up more heavier on alts. Until then, happy to take trades on the Bitcoin alt pairs if alts start to gain momentum. We long stacks last week. We made money. I'm long PEPE right now. I'm currently making money, not a whole lot, but a little bit of money. So you can kind of trade these alts in the meantime. Not just on leverage, but, spot trades, 3-4 month holds. And we're going to get into a narrative that I think is a good 3-4 month hold here in a minute. But I just want to show you this ETH BTC chart to kind of reiterate my thesis here that, look, ETH BTC is still bleeding. And if we go into the weekly, there's probably still a bit more damage to come. This is still in free fall, and I am targeting the 5.5 level for ETH BTC. And that might happen around August, September. Now, completely coincidentally, Benjamin Cowen also outlined September as his expected month for Bitcoin dominance to top, and 𝗲𝗏, who came on Banter last Friday, he also said that he expects Bitcoin ETH to rally for the next 3 months. And if you add 3 months onto June, then you're also targeting around the September region as well. So a couple other analysts here are actually backing up or confirming my bias, which I've had this chart for, I mean, how many months? Probably since the very beginning of the year here when this second lower high started to form. So interesting that the timeline all kind of lines up for September. Is that also the timeline where you get that stock market sell-off, that acceleration of ETH versus BTC bleeding, and then a bounce in equities? Maybe as well. Maybe that actually lines up. But for alts, I am targeting, at least until further notice, this region as a bigger alt accumulation zone. Until then, I think Bitcoin dominance is still looking strong enough to warrant being heavier in Bitcoin. So when I'm longing Bitcoin more than I'm longing shitcoins, and I'm still more long in my spot portfolio Bitcoin versus ETH until I make a bigger reversal. Or the other option is simply to trade coins that are showing relative strength. Like we know on pumps, PEPE has tended to outperform. That's just, I guess, based on market hype, right? You've also had like stacks outperforming, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin. You have these specific narratives which outperform Bitcoin, and then everything else kind of ends up underperforming. But we're going to get into the alt more in a second, because first, I want to get into the title of this video, which is 240 days to buy Bitcoin and altcoins. Now, you may think at first that's clickbait, but I want to show you the timing here, the very coincidental timing of BlackRock launching its potential spot Bitcoin ETF, as well as the Bitcoin halving. Now, this is very important, right? In front of you on your screen is the timeline which outlines the necessary steps for BlackRock to tick off in order to get a full ETF listing / approval from the SEC. So essentially what happened is they published their request on the 15th of June, which was 13 days ago. The iShares filing was published on the Federal Register for comments today. So just today was the first day where the SEC could begin to start commenting, and this is the beginning of the 240-day window today, could begin commenting on their application. Now, this is very interesting. By the 12th of August, right? So in 14 days' time, we will get the approval or denial of the ETF. Now, the SEC is highly likely to take option 3, which is an extension. We know they want to buy as much time as possible. We know Binance and Coinbase are still going to have to go through court. I think they're going to want to buy time here. It's unlike the SEC. I mean, it would be like them to flat out deny it, but it would be very unlike them, I think, to approve straight away. So let's just assume the maximum time scenario happens here and they extend 45 days. They have a second deadline then on September 26th. Funnily enough, that kind of lines up with this whole Bitcoin ETH thesis as well. So they have an opportunity here to approve or deny or extend another 90 days. I think what they're going to do is extend another 90 days. Now, this would be, your longest case scenario. Then, after that 90 days, they have another deadline. This is kind of stupid, by the way. Why is this a thing? Why are these deadlines a thing? I don't know. It's just how they operate, I guess. Another deadline to extend another 60 days. Let's assume they do extend another 60 days. Then your final deadline where they have to give a decision, and they're probably going to drag this out because it's the SEC, is on the 23rd of Feb 2024. And this is when official approval can happen. Until then, well, firstly, we're going to have a much better idea if we're getting approved or not as time goes on. But until this approval, this is kind of your accumulation window, if you believe in this spot ETF thesis. This 240 days is your window. And during these 240 days, we're going to get pullbacks. Amazing. Like we are. Gareth says that we could get a pullback in Q3. I think at some point, liquidity is going to start to affect the stock market and the crypto market. I'm not calling for a bear market. I simply think we get a decent retracement, maybe after a pump, big retracement, buying opportunities. Whether that ends up being as low as 24 to 25K or whether we pump and then retrace back to 28, 29, it doesn't really matter for me. All I know is that we will get a big pullback, and on those pullbacks, I'll be accumulating because we're at the last phase of the cycle here where we're kind of in accumulation mode. If you have, I'm sure a lot of you have already been accumulating, but we're kind of in the final stretch here. I feel like it's this last 240 days prior to this ETF, and also coincidentally the Bitcoin halving, which is crazy that lines up with the ETF as well within a 2-month period. That's kind of your accumulation window. But keep in mind, the Bitcoin halving pump typically doesn't happen until almost a year after the halving. So 2025 is your cycle target for a new Bitcoin high, late 2024 to probably early 2025 though. If you look at the cycles, I'm slightly skeptical of the cycles, if you're asking me, just because I think things are different. So I'm not wishfully thinking that it's going to be this magical Q4 2024 or Q1 2025 pump. I think the market will do its best to surprise us and keep us on our toes. So my strategy doesn't really rely on timing. My strategy more relies on accumulating during massive dips, factoring in that structural inflows could impact the market positively over a long time horizon from this ETF approval. And given the fact I'm very bullish on Bitcoin and ETH as assets, continuing to stack them, but also look at entering altcoin positions as well as things start to reverse on ETH BTC, because I also believe in a bull market, just the pure beta you get from alts versus Bitcoin and ETH is going to give you those massive gains. But I'm still more than 50% Bitcoin and ETH. Although I did a tweet the other day, I said, look, I'm half Bitcoin and ETH, but I'm 90% alts in terms of where my headspace and mental energy goes, because that's where you need to pay a lot more attention, obviously. So let's look at Smiley Capital's thesis now. So we kind of have the timeline now. It's 240 days. You know my plan. But Q3, it's still a bit of an unknown, all right? I think at some point we get a pullback during that period. But does that mean we don't pump first or pump after the pullback? Well, Smiley Capital has a theory here that we're going to get a huge pump within the next 3 months, and Bitcoin's actually going to go to 50K. In fact, he said that 45K is his bearish case for this year. His logical target's 46 to 48 with a focal point of 60. He thinks we'll also get some media attention around that level. This is his price target. He thinks it's a structural uptrend. And if you listen to my spaces, which has his full logic outlined, if you're interested in learning more, before you comment, he's just being a fudder. Actually, go and listen. I think it's not a fudder, but just a liar. Go and listen. It's very interesting. It's obviously very subjective. And look, I think 50K in 3 months is too ambitious, personally. I'm a bit more skeptical than him, but he outlined a pretty compelling thesis. And the thesis is basically, look, we're in a structural bull market. The bears basically haven't flipped bullish yet. We're going to see them flip bullish, and we're going to see massive short squeezes in areas of not much resistance, like 34 to 37. He thinks we're going to squeeze to 40 quick. And at 40, you start to have a narrative perpetuate that results in kind of your blow off top to 45.50. That's his thesis. And then he thinks we're going to come back down and then, go and test some of those lows again, maybe the new lows 30, 35, and then prep for a new bull run around the time of the halving, like we're talking about with the 240-day window. So his theory isn't so different from others. It's more the fact that he thinks we're just going to get a pump a lot sooner than people think. So would you be prepared for a Bitcoin 50K in 3 months? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to learn more about his thesis, it's about an hour in. About 30 minutes in to this spaces. He starts outlining the theory there. I'll actually get him on the show one time. To be honest, the reason why I'm even listening to this guy, you might say, Miles, why are you even listening to this guy? He's just a typical, bullish random guy on Twitter making bullish comments. Like, I agree at face value. However, he was the only person to actually genuinely call pretty close to the top. He was shorting all year. I actually remember his Twitter. Everyone was hating on him because he was shorting all year last year, and he made, look at how much money you would have made if you were shorting all year. So he was right during in the collapse, and his system slipped bullish. So I'm paying attention. Am I trading purely on the thesis of 50K? No, but am I long? Yes, I am long. I even opened a long yesterday because I thought that we're starting to pump a little bit here, which is good. And my PEPE position, it's also up. Nice. Up 400 now. So we are starting to get a bit of momentum, and I don't feel comfortable being out of the market when we have momentum. So I opened a stacks long at 55 cents, closed some of my position, flipped some of the profits into a Bitcoin long, riding this with PEPE, obviously, as well as my spot bags, which I've been accumulating since 2019, but more so heavily towards the end of last year. And yeah, I'm well positioned, but I'm also heavy enough in cash that if we do get a big reversal here, I'm happy to buy any large pullbacks and add to my portfolio. So I'm not a complete 𝗵𝗆𝗄𝗃𝗃 bullish guy that's 100% in. No, I'm still adding to that cash balance, still stacking cash. So I have, a big enough cash position that even if we do pump now, when we do retrace, I have capital to actually buy a bigger dip, because I still think we do get a bigger dip at some point. Things never move in a straight line. Someone said, Miles, be chilling. What are your conviction coins? All right, let's talk through some of these. So I'm going to reserve the videos where I outline my entire altcoin thesis for closer to the time when I'm buying heavy on alts. Because the thing is, ETH BTC is still a little bit of a way, has a bit of a ways to go. For now, I'm focusing on select narratives. So I'm not really, I bought a bit of spot, Solana and Matic during the dip. I just thought it was a good opportunity. I've been buying some altcoins, actually like some Stargate and just DCAing into some projects like that I believe in long term. But there are a couple narratives which in the short term have better relative strength than others, and that's why I'm prioritizing them before I rotate or start really accumulating these other coins which haven't run yet. Now, the ones with relative strength, I think, are going to be L2s. I think Q3, Q4, ahead of the 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗧𝗃 upgrade in December/January, L2s are going to run, in my opinion. So I've got my eye on L2s. Arbitrum, I think, is fantastic. Interestingly, Rand doesn't like the FDV here. In my opinion, FDV doesn't fucking matter. Look at last bull run. Just go and look at the coins that pumped the most. Solana, $100 billion FDV. Barely anything in circulating supply. Pumped. AVAX, pumped. Everything with a high FDV, pumped. Because people don't give a shit in the short term. People just want to buy the shiniest object, and Arbitrum's a shiny object. And in the run-up to EIP, I think it does perform well. Now, I am accumulating a little bit. I'm DCAing in on pullbacks now. This is what I'm DCAing into now. Why am I DCAing on pullbacks only now? Because I can't time the bottom here. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we pump now. All I know is that there's a catalyst coming, right? So when you don't know when it's coming, but you know it's coming, the most risk-off thing to do is just accumulate. So that's what I'm doing. But I will go a lot heavier, so I have stables reserved for the ETH BTC flip. So you guys, I've gone through the thesis before on the fact that ETH BTC has a bit more to bleed. When that bleeds more and I make that rotation, I'll go heavier into something like an Arbitrum. I will also at that time buy Optimism and Metis and a little bit of Loopring and some of these smaller caps. Mostly though, Arbitrum OP and maybe a bit of Matic. Saving capital long-term for ZK Sync, but I don't think this will be part of the narrative quite yet because I think their coin won't be until Q1 next year, and then the EIP kind of narrative will probably have died off a little bit. But those are the ones I'm looking at. So L2's definitely on my list. Stacks definitely on my list because I think BRC 20/ordinals, this Bitcoin narrative is not going anywhere. I got an entry at 55 cents, so I am in profit. Full disclosure, took some profits, looking to buy back in on a major dip. In terms of major dips here, we're kind of at a weird level for stacks. Let me actually go into the daily. That's the weekly, daily. Yeah, we're starting to break structure. So for me, just wait and see if this reclaims. So I will open a trade if it reclaims on the daily, holds this level, because then, you're having a pivot off your lows. If not, your next target to buy is probably 67 cents with a stop below. So those are probably my two levels for buying stacks in the short term. Longer term pullbacks probably happen back down to that 50-cent range. And I would still accumulate there if we get a bigger dip. I will look at Stacks BTC though, because you guys know I'm a big fan of the BTC pairs. Stacks BTC. All right, starting to break down as well. So you would also want, if you are buying the reclamation of support, you would want to do that in confluence with the Stacks BTC pair. If not, you're probably going to have to accept that you're going to have to try and buy on the lows, but I wouldn't catch a falling knife. I would wait for a pivot and a higher low to be made before buying it again. So yeah, a bit to happen there, but Stacks is one. Look, I'm still in a small long there. Funnily enough, PEPE is actually one. If we see a period, now I'm not buying this now. I am long now, as you guys know. I'm not buying spot though. If we see a period of market movement, or if I'm anticipating a period of market movement, I still think in terms of just a pure beta play to the market, this is probably one of your best bets. I just feel like PEPE, it just runs so hard when retail gets back in. And it's kind of my thesis for why I prefer at the moment to long PEPE over Doge. I went through my theory last week, but I still prefer PEPE over Doge. And that's why yesterday when I saw the Bitcoin starting to reverse and I took a Bitcoin long, I took a PEPE long, which is, you guys will see, it's a quarter or a third of the size of my Bitcoin long, but it's up double because it just moves on higher multiples, man. It's even less leverage. This is only on 5x, whereas my Bitcoin position's on 7x, and it's still moving more. That's just what happens with PEPE. So yeah, Andrew Kang also said he sees it out. Well, it is outperforming. L1's team's regularly dumping, trade into EIP. Yeah, ARB's outperforming. That's one I've been accumulating. Still actually holding my airdrop there, which is awesome. So I got a nice bag. I think I got a 5-figure airdrop. Guys, 5 figures for doing a few transactions on Gains Network. It's the best money I've made in my life. Not the most money I've made in my life, but the easiest money I've made. And if you're not in the airdrop game and you have some time, consider getting into it. Consider. Definitely a high EV risk reward play, especially I think for like things like layer 0, which probably the snapshot hasn't been taken as opposed to things like ZK Sync. Now, at this stage in June, because we talk about these since November, but yeah, layer 0 definitely I would still be doing for a potential airdrop. That's also a token I want to accumulate. Problem is, we can't buy it now. So I'm in Stargate as my proxy bet. I'm just stacking slowly, but I'll actually convert some of my Stargate into layer 0 when layer 0 launches, assuming the valuation's okay. Why? Because I think next cycle, the new coins perform the best, and layer 0 is a new coin. Holders aren't underwater, unlike a lot of other L1s, and it's an exciting new product that I think the market will just be excited about. And even though it's probably going to launch at some exorbitant valuation, I think if the market pumps, despite FDV, something like a layer 0, you'll get some nice pumps out of it. So that's why I'll look to accumulate that, but I'll update you on that. All right, cool. ETH BTC narrative, yearly highs. ETH BTC today, yearly lows. Hasaka, BTC maxis, host the death of Ethereum spaces. ETH BTC bottoms and rallies. He says this comes next. ETH start waxing poetic about ultra-centralized money and make liberal use of the F word. ETH BTC tops repeat. You know what's funny? That sounds hilarious, but it's actually kind of what I'm lining up as well. I'm gonna show you my chart. Where is my ETH BTC chart? So it's funny, this kind of thesis he outlines, he's kind of taking the piss, but yeah, we haven't seen this yet. The death of Ethereum, it hasn't come yet, but it'll come here. You'll start hearing about the death of Ethereum here. You'll start hearing about it. It's definitely when you'll start hearing about it. So just a few more percent on ETH BTC and you'll start hearing about that. 8 to 10% on ETH BTC, you'll start hearing about that. You'll definitely start hearing about that, and then that's when we pivot. So just be aware. You'll really feel like buying Bitcoin in a few months, but that's actually when I'll be buying Ethereum and alts and not Bitcoin. For now, we're still heavy in Bitcoin longs. Bit of quick news, rapid fire news that I think is important. So I want to bring it to you guys, but I won't go deep on this. I'm sure on Rand Spaces, if you want to watch this after, they'll be talking about it a bit more. First thing, SUI. Very bad from SUI. We saw evidence that the team was dumping tokens. It's, 𝗕𝗍𝗄𝗏 points out here that they haven't even disclosed their token release schedule 2 months after the token's been publicly launched. So that's kind of crazy that they haven't actually detailed the token release schedule. That's insane to me. And yeah, SUI scam, hashtag SUI scam was trending again. I think SUI they've just made mistake after mistake. Like their biggest mistake ever was not doing an airdrop because you just pissed off half your community on day one. You've done this weird launch. I get it, but you still annoyed all the community. The token's launched very high in valuation. It has pumped off the back of some listings, but then you've had this crazy sell pressure now being kind of proven that it's from the team. What did SUI actually say? The purpose of the communication is to share the tokenomics. Gradual addition to the supply has proceeded as planned. SUI's not sold staking rewards or other tokens from locked or non-circulating. All insider remain subject and compliant with their lockups. Yeah, so what they're saying here is, yeah, we sold, but it's still compliant, guys. But why didn't you publish the exact vesting schedule before you decided to dump? I mean, yeah, it's just off-putting. It's just off-putting. You also had, as other big news, this Prime TUSD story. I don't want to FUD too much, and part of the reason why I'm not panicking out of my Bitcoin long is because I refuse to listen to this FUD, but there is some interesting evidence here that TUSD actually pumped the market. You can see here a picture. Oh, this picture just got removed. Anyway, there's basically a picture of when $1 billion of TUSD was printed. That's when the Bitcoin pump started. Don't know if it's actually verifiable or not. That's why the reason the market pumped. I highly doubt it, but it was just an interesting visual to look at. And also you can see over the past day that the majority of volume on Binance was actually this TUSD pair, which comes at a time that people are questioning the solvency of TUSD, given the fact that Prime, actually their banking partner collapsed and it was found that $26,000 was locked with the DOJ. So they came out and said they've suspended all deposits, but they're not affected, that they're maintaining USD rails for minting and redemption. Everything's fine. Adam Cochran replied, he said, is this one you say you have no exposure and payment rail and have no exposure and maintain payment rails? Which is it? What are those rails? Then TrueUSD said, sir, if you'd like to onboard USD with our new banking partners, you could send your request and our team will be happy to assist. So kind of taking the piss out of 𝗵𝗿𝗃𝗃 there. But you can also see the BUSD pairs, the USD pairs on Binance are some of the biggest contract for differences changes in the past few weeks. So a lot of pumping happening on Binance and TUSD pumping on Binance. So yeah, I'm not sure here. 3 hours ago, it said, let me just zoom in. Bitcoin TUSD still the highest volume Bitcoin trading pair listed on CoinMarketCap, and it isn't even close. So let's actually verify this. CoinMarketCap. Actually verify this. But yeah, it's interesting. If that is pumping the market, is there anything shady going on? By the way, I love how PEPE is like your top trending coin. Love it. Love it. Good for my PEPE long. It's down a little bit. Keep printing. Keep printing. It's at 400 up. All right. Bitcoin markets. Yeah, TUSD pair. Still leading 2.4 bill. So this could be a couple things, right? It could be people trading out of TUSD because they're scared of holding TUSD. And whenever we see stablecoin FUD, Bitcoin tends to be somewhere where inflows occur. That could be the first thing. Second thing is it's manipulation. So you have one big player, one big whale, or TUSD themselves pumping Bitcoin using TUSD. Maybe they're positioning themselves for insolvency. Who knows? In that case, this would be a manipulated move. And yeah, Bitcoin is being manipulated to the upside. I just don't want to buy into the FUD when there's no verified. There's no verification. Like, it's all just screenshots and speculation and it's very, and these small accounts like posting FUD to get engagement. It's kind of like not really what I want to base my investment thesis off. So I'm definitely not going to base my investment or long or short thesis off a little bit of stablecoin FUD. But look, it's just something to keep your eye on. I'm just saying, keep your eye on the situation. It is evolving. Fabian said, and I respect him, so let's see what he said here. He posted just a few minutes ago. Notable that the initial burst of momentum is cooling. We actually underperformed equities today on a better adjusted basis, despite Fidelity filing unlike last week. Volumes are also normalizing. DEF makes us less immune to TradFi and headline risks again. Prime trust crumbling here might also be a factor, but good eye nevertheless. These are important factors to consider moving forward. I would agree with him here. I think the market probably is less immune to headline risk because it's been immune recently. Like, any pullback in stocks is kind of being eaten up because of this ETF narrative. The only thing I would say, I'm not sure it's ETF hype cooling per se. I don't know if that's what's happening more so than just the fact we're heading into major resistance. Like, yeah, it could be hype cooling, but if your pure substantive basis for hype cooling is price, I think the reason for this could be because we're heading into resistance and there's so many shorters. And you can make the opposite argument. If I'm going to counteract Fabian here, I could argue that consolidation above 30K is a pullback. So I could make the argument that there's enough demand here that even at huge resistance, we're not getting insta-rejected. We're consolidating, which is actually a bullish sign structurally for the market. So it's quite interesting here. Yeah, you've got two contrasting viewpoints. I'm not really too worried. I'm going to move my stop up to just below here at probably just below 29. Take a small loss if we go down. Keep my PEPE long open. Move that up to entry. So I'm chilling short term. So then if we get any big pullbacks, I'll probably end up buying. Probably around 29. It will be that big level, 29.4 in this region, and then we'll reassess. Simple. So that's kind of my plan there. In terms of shorter term stuff. So yeah, I'm not going to pay attention to the FUD just because I don't think if you pay attention to FUD, you end up doing very well in this market. USDT FUD the other week ended up marking the local bottom. That was actually the time to buy. So there you go. Someone says pump starting. 32 has to be broken. Yeah, 32 does have to be broken. Absolutely. However, here's your bullish hopium. If 32 is broken, and I want to just get a clean chart for you. I want to show you a very clean chart. Let me find my cleanest chart on the yearly. I want to get my yearly chart up. 12 months. Is it this one? No, it's not. Which one is it? This one? Yeah. Okay, watch this. Okay. This is a very key level we're above, right? So if you're going super macro on a yearly chart, we've had a yearly close and a yearly open at the 30K level. So don't underestimate just how important this level is. And if we look on the monthly chart, right? And you kind of want to draw in monthly resistance, it's around this range. It's around this range. Let's just draw it in actually on with a rectangle. Let's just do super basic TA. If you want to draw in a basic level on the monthly, basic support and resistance, it's roughly around 31 to 32. If you break above 32, there's not much until 38. Your next level is like really not until this area here at 38. So if you do break above, the Bitcoin move from 32 to 38, I think happens very quick. And that's a 15% move that'll send alts flying. The main issue is breaking above 32, and we may not do it. But I still think we test. So I don't know. I think we maybe get a thrust into this. I don't know whether it's a pullback first and then a thrust, or a thrust and then a pullback. If I knew that, I would have unlimited money because I could trade it perfectly, just like predicting lottery numbers. But I do know at some point we're going to end up testing this level. And I think it happens sooner rather than later. Well, it has to happen sooner, because if it doesn't happen within the next few weeks, then I think that's a bearish sign for Bitcoin, that it starts to stall, and we'll probably see price roll over, make another lower high here and start to reject. But yeah. Shallow pullbacks, big pumps, short squeeze. Yeah, big pumps and shallow pullbacks indicate demand. I mean, Fabian says demand's hype's cooling. I don't know, bro. I think it's just there's a lot of short pressure, and even that is being eaten up by longs. That's just how I feel about the market right now. All right, I think that's it. I think we've covered a lot today. I think we've gone over more of a long-term thesis. We've gone over my short-term plans. We've gone over some of the timeline here for the BlackRock Spot ETF in line with the halving. I think, yeah, we've covered a decent amount of ground here. So yeah, I want to remind you, if you do want to trade, you can trade on OKX. Remember the $30,000 bonus for those who want to open the mystery boxes. Also, G-Trade, we still have the trade open here. It's starting to reverse a little bit, Bitcoin, but yeah, probably going to. I've already got my invalidation there. PEPE starting to reverse as well. I did say that at the start of the show. As soon as I end the show and have to start to set my positions, it's going to reverse. But yeah, if you want to trade, you can trade over there. Prime XBT as well for the 25% discount on commissions. So links in the description to all that. And I think that's it. Just looking through final comments. Great coverage. Thank you enjoyed. Thank you everyone for joining. Hans, thank you for joining. Rusty, thank you for joining. Crypto Beach, thank you for joining. Crypto Beach, I'm going to be on a beach in a couple of weeks. I'm going to actually Italy and Greece next week, which is awesome, because I really do need a bit of a holiday. Funnily enough, though, you guys won't even know I'm away, because over that week I've got all this amazing pre-recorded. I'm working with an editor to actually record for you guys, which outlines I've actually been kind of having to hold back some cool stuff I've been working on, like my entire thesis outlined. Because I feel like, just quickly, a lot of people, it's very short term, right? Even these shows are very short term. I want to go a bit more long term and look at long term, the actual impact of crypto. Next week, when I'm away, gives me the perfect opportunity to do that. So I'll be dropping my thesis, my long term Bitcoin thesis, long term trading strategies, just focusing more long term. Because sometimes on these shows, we do get caught up in short-term news. I think it's important to step back as well. So I'll be on the beach, but you'll be watching the shows. So I'm going to finish recording all of them this week. I'll see you guys later. Petro as well, thank you for joining. And hopefully these longs don't get too wrecked. I'm going to have to manage these stop losses now as soon as I end the show. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.